How does your child spell love? In this podcast, we're going to be talking about ways that we can nurture our loving relationships with children and individualize the things that we do with them so they feel seen, valued, and heard. And as an aside, it actually makes our relationships really fun and engaging. Without further ado, let's get started. I'm excited to introduce our guest today. I'll be speaking with Dr. Hokehe Eko. She is a mother of three, an integrative pediatrician, CEO of Glow Pediatrics, and a TEDx speaker. She partners with parents of children with ADHD and autism to address the root causes of their children's behaviors and boost their brain health using integrative medicine. She's also the CEO of Kids of Hope, which is an organization that shares love, hope, and dignity with children in foster care. After sustaining brain injuries, she was told that it was impossible to become a pediatrician, but she uses her experiences of thriving with obstacles to help children with ADHD and children in foster care to see themselves as capable of fulfilling their dreams. I am so excited for us to have this interview, so let's dive in. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. I am so excited because on today's episode, I'm joined by Dr. Hokehe Eko. She is an incredible pediatrician and author, brain health coach expert, and also just a wonderful friend to me. So, Dr. Eko, thank you so much for jumping on our show today.
Yes. Thank you so much, Lindsay, for having me. It's always a pleasure. Always.
Likewise. So, today we're talking about Dr. Eko's book, Children's Love Letters. And this is a pediatrician's guide to how your child spells love. I also did a previous interview with Dr. Eko, and that was all about ADHD and other tips for brain health. So if folks are interested, you can check out the link in the description or in our show notes. So just to begin our interview today, can you start off by telling me a little bit about the book?
Yes, I would love to. So I wrote children's love letters out of a need for myself as a mom of three kids, right? So I have three kids who are all very different. And I had this idea. I know it's a God-given idea, and to just explore what love really means, because I started to ask myself, what does it really mean? Because I went through a time where I was really struggling to meet the needs of my kids, and I just felt like not a very good mommy. And I was like, how do I do this better? And then I got this idea, right, to find ways that children spell love. And I started doing that, and I had no idea it was going to turn into a book. I was just exploring for my own self. And then I was like, wait, can turn this into a book for other parents, because I realize it's in the really small things. You know, lots of times we hear about it's not the quantity of time, it's the quality of the time you spend with your children that's really important. We don't really hear so much more about what else, right? And of course, sometimes it comes to us as parents, but it's always helpful if you can learn from other parents who have gone before you or are in the same journey with you about what works for them. So that's how this whole thing came up, because I was trying to find a way to connect better with my kids.
I love this book because, like you mentioned, quality of time is so important. But what exactly does that mean? How can we increase the quality if we don't have those specific steps or resources? So these are really like great bite-sized chunks of information and strategies that parents can start using right away. And I love how interactive this book is. Can you say a little bit more about the ways that parents or really anyone who interacts with kids, like teachers, this is another great resource. How does that interactive piece play out for those who read this book?
Yeah. So one of the biggest things I've found in the last few years is that unless I fill my cup up with love and peace and joy and clean up my own life, I cannot share it with anybody else. Definitely not with my kids, because kids go off of mostly what you do, not even what you say. Yes, what you say is important, but they're also watching you like a hawk and all your actions, right? And they're
That is
soaking
so
it
true.
up. And then you see it exhibited in how they act, right? And you're just like, oh my God, that looks like something I just did. Right. So yes, I use the alphabet. So each letter of the alphabet, I talked about a way children spell love. So A and B and C, for example. And then I also left a spot for parents, like a reflective place where after you've read the chapter and you've thought about how you can implement this in your own life and also the lives of your children, then you can write it there. So it's like a roadmap. So by the time you finish the book, you have a roadmap for all the little ways your child follows that one pattern. So you have sort of like a blueprint or a roadmap to help you develop the bond and strengthen the bond with your child based on the way they are spelling love to you.
That is so powerful. And like what we know about learning and brain research is that having that opportunity to write down your reflections, pencil to paper or pen to paper, is so good for solidifying learning. And so you have these incredible kind of reflection questions at the end of each chapter. And rather than just thinking about it, you provide literally a space for parents to jot down their thoughts, their reflections, and then ideas, which is so cool because I know we get busy and sometimes we don't have a spare journal laying around. So having this space in the book is really powerful. I love the fact that it's alphabetical. I think that makes it really fun. And I
Yes.
was so impressed that you found ways to integrate every letter of the alphabet. You have a really meaningful, a really meaningful example.
Yeah, I do.
So
Yeah.
L, this is chapter 12. And if folks are watching the YouTube version, you can see my book. And I have lots of sticky notes in it. I took a lot of notes and learned a lot of things from reading this personally. So L is for laughter. Chapter 12, it says love is laughter. And something I enjoyed about your book is that you have quotes from different people and also research. So in this chapter, you talk about the quote where it says, laughter activates the body's natural relaxation response. And it's amazing. It's like internal jogging, providing a good massage to all the internal organs while also toning abdominal muscle, which is great. Who doesn't want to tone their abdominal muscles, right?
Lots of us do.
I would love to know kind of what are several of your key takeaways, maybe some parts of your research as you were putting this resource together that really stuck with you personally.
Yes. So a big one for me is the chapter 14, love nurtures,
Mm.
right? Because it goes back to me as a pediatrician discovering how trauma affects the brain of young children and the whole adverse childhood experiences issue that has come up in the last few years, right? So, and I had that experience, of course, in my practice. There's one that always sticks out. I don't know if I've told this story or podcast, but if I have, here it is again. Because it's the reason I am who I am today. And it's the reason I have evolved in the way I treat patients as well. So there was a little boy who was in 10 foster homes in 6 months. And that's
Whoa.
shocking, first of
That,
all.
yes, wow.
And he was brought to my office because they said he was hurt at the last foster home. So they pulled him out. But they came with the diagnosis of he has ADHD. And so I watched this kid give me a hug 15 times. But yes, in between, he would run off, like hit both walls and then come back and give me a hug. And I heard myself saying, I've never said that my whole life before then, but I heard myself saying, I don't think he has ADHD. I think he needs a loving home. And I was like, wait, where did that even come from? But it's something maybe it's because he was giving me the hugs. I think that's what did it. I said that, and of course, the worker looked at me like I had two heads. Like, really, doctor? I'm like, wait, he's too young for me to give him any meds. Just try, just humor me.
Yes.
Okay, because I decided to stick to my guns and just do that. So I did that, and then a few weeks later, actually a few months later, I saw him again, and this time he was sitting on the laps of this foster dad that's well known in our practice as being an amazing dad. And he was calling him Papa, and I got one hug. I was like, and there was no more hitting the walls, like bouncing up and down. Like, oh, so where did the ADHD go? Like,
Yes.
oh, wait, love. So I wasn't crazy after all. This kid, that's when it really solidified for me how the environment can make such drastic changes. And of course, then I now found the research that shows, yes, trauma can show up as hyperactivity, or the other extreme as the child, of course, will shy away from everybody. But yes, it can show up as hyperactivity. And if I had just hit the kids or given the kids meds, then what? We wouldn't have solved the underlying or addressed the underlying issue, and he would have just continued not to do well. That informs the way I look at children now. I look at the whole child, not just what symptoms are you exhibiting. But yes, that's one big one for me, is that love nurtures. It does. more than we know. It literally
Wow.
makes changes to the brain of your child and how your child will show up or grow up in the world. But thankfully, even when a child has been traumatized, still love heals, love nurtures. The brain can heal itself and healing can come. But of course, we have to put that child in a loving environment.
That is fantastic. It's amazing to hear that story and great for you for being an advocate and, just putting that information out there and the fact that they were responsive and this child found a warm home that provided that nurturing for him. That's wonderful to hear. You mentioned love heals, and that reminds me of chapter 8, which is yet another chapter that I have bookmarked. It says love is healing. And do you mind if I read a quote to you from your book?
Of course.
Great. Okay, so you put in chapter 8, you say, modeling taking responsibility for our mistakes and expressing forgiveness when our children take responsibility for theirs offers healing on both sides and builds mutual trust. Healing comes from knowing we are loved, forgiven, cherished, valuable, and appreciated. We have to look within ourselves and do our best to heal from past hurts so they don't get in the way of helping our children to heal from hurtful experiences. That was something I had highlighted and starred in my book. Can you say a little bit more about how our experiences and our, background, how that can impact the way that we show up for kids and a little bit more about this taking responsibility?
Yes. Going back to what I had just talked about, the adverse childhood experiences. So the reason we found out about that is because researchers were following or talking to a group of adults. And it turns out the chronic diseases they were experiencing in their adult life were as a result of unresolved trauma from their childhood. Right. So that's on a physical level. On an emotional level, that does even more damage. I mean, trauma, unresolved hurts, forgiveness. If you hold on to unforgiveness, that for sure, it's like it's been described as like eating you from the inside out. So important for us as parents to deal with what issues we've had in the past or even ongoing, because the things we don't resolve actually hurt us more than the other person we're holding that has done something to us. And yes, it's easier said than done. And that's why I'm such a big advocate for counseling. I tell people I have one and I've told her she can't fire me. That's what I tell my teenagers when I'm trying to get them to go to counseling. I'm like, I'm not labeling you as crazy. Do I look crazy? They're like, no, I have one too. And I told her she can't fire me. And they will go to counseling, doctor.
I love that.
So yeah, it's just dealing with all of that because it's so important for us to deal with that because that's really the truth of who we are, right? At the core.
Mhm.
And if we want to ignore all of that and just paint over it, then we're really not living our authentic lives. And it will show up in more ways than you know. It will show up in the way you respond to your children. Maybe something that happened in your past will trigger a response that's inappropriate to your child. And if you don't resolve it, then it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. So important that we as parents identify and spend the time. It's often painful sometimes to go back to the past. Yes,
Mhm.
it's necessary because it's like, think about it like a sore, right? You're getting you give antibiotics to get to the bottom of the sore versus we just put some topical antibiotics on top and it never heals, right? Because deep inside we have infection brewing and we're not addressing it. So that's the same thing. It's take a deep dive into what's going on with you and so you can show up as a better version of yourself for your child.
That's so powerful. It's hard work, but important work. And I know Dr. Dan Siegel talks about forming a cohesive narrative and how if we don't make sense of our background, it's difficult to not have a cohesive understanding of what happened to us and how that can affect us present day with our kids and how we show up for them. Modeling apologizing, that's something I know that some parents and also educators have a hard time with. Why is that something that you include in here? In your book and how does that impact our relationships with kids?
Yes, I include it in there because I've had to practice it in my own life. I have an 18-year-old and yes, teenagers don't come with manuals either. So I am learning how to handle her and how to relate to her. And she has no issues pointing out the things I did that I've told her not to do. So I have two choices. I could either act like I don't know what she's talking about, or I could
Uh-huh.
hold on to it and say, yeah, mommy, sorry. I know I told you not to do that, and I know I could have handled this better. So I'm sorry. Yeah. And I found
Mm,
that it's definitely brought our relationship closer. Yes,
mm.
she's still a teenager, and yes, I'm still the mother trying to figure her out. But yes, definitely, we're getting better for sure. And she comes and tells me things, which isn't that what we all want? That when there's an
Exactly.
issue, they can actually come and talk to you. Forget all the other things that they do. That's really the crux of the matter, is that
Mm.
your children feel safe enough to come and tell you when it matters. Because there's so much going on in this world. There's so much stuff. I mean, we can't even block them adequately from the internet because they use the computers for school. So how are you going to block anything? You can't. So it's you just modeling for them at home so they feel safe enough to come talk to you about what they're going through. And I think that's the biggest goal as parents of teenagers or even younger ones, is that we model for them, because I want my daughter to grow up and have good boundaries and good
Yes.
expectations for herself, right? I don't want her to feel like, oh, anybody can just treat me anyway
Mm.
because they're years older than me. It's okay, because that's a slippery slope. Because if the kids don't learn to speak up for themselves, then I mean, worse and worse things can happen. I mean, you can only imagine. And they may not want to speak up because they see you as an adult. And that's not what we want, because the world has gotten definitely more dangerous. And we need our kids to be able to say, no, that's inappropriate, and move away from the situation. So if we can't even model that at home, then they're going to accept it from other people outside. And I don't think that's good.
I couldn't agree more with you on that. That's so important. And I think that encouraging kids to come to us and confide in us when we become, as Tina Payne Bryson calls, that safe harbor, that is so important for our relationship, and helping them understand how they can be advocates for themselves. And as we're modeling a healthy relationship, then that's something we hope they seek out as they, find their own adult relationships in different ways. I think when we think about working with younger children, when our young kids come to us and they're upset because their sibling broke their brown crayon or they can't find their Spider-Man toy and they're really dysregulated. When we're there and we just say, "Oh, I can tell this is upsetting to you. Thank you for telling me." That kind of lays the foundation of having our children come to us. And when they're older, of course, we want them to tell us about if they have peers who are doing unsafe things. A lot of us think, yes, I want to hear about that. So it can start at an early age where we just are accepting and we say, "Thank you for telling me." I know some parents and teachers have told me that when their child comes to them with seemingly trivial things like a broken crayon, we might be tempted to say, "Oh, it's no big deal. You have plenty of other crayons. Don't come to me with this kind of thing." But the more we think about what we're trying to have them do down the road, when we look down the road of development, we want to just be that safe place and say, "Thank you for telling me. Thank you for coming to me." That's just so important. I have another one. Chapter 9 is Love is Imagination. And I love how you gave the example of, pointing to a big fluffy cloud, and as an adult or as a parent, having that playful imagination, how that can expand children's creativity. What are some other ways of infusing imagination as parent or an adult caregiver?
Yeah, it's as simple as looking around you. Again, it's taking the time to reflect on who you are and who you want to be, because the one thing that's constant is change, and we all
Mhm.
want to be changing in the right direction,
Exactly.
the opposite direction. So yeah, I have found myself, I'm learning to imagine the life I would like to have. I'm imagining the trips I want to take with the kids. And there's something powerful about the brain. When you put pictures in your brain goes to work to make those come true, right?
Vision board, right?
Sets you up in positions for that to happen. It's the power God gave to our brains, right? It's God that created our brains that way. Really, it's what you feed your brain that you will see. So if you start imagining the worst, because I'm so guilty, I used to do that so much, where I would sit and there's an issue, and before you know it, I have imagined all the worst things and nothing has actually happened.
Guilty of
So
that. Just gonna say, speaking of speaking of having a good counselor or therapist, my counselor calls that catastrophizing, so I can relate.
Totally. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So what if I use my brain and that precious time to imagine all the amazing things that could happen? And so I have found that, and I'm teaching my kids to do the same thing. It's so cool when you can sit and imagine just I don't know. I love to travel. So that's what I love to imagine, all the different countries I could go to and the different ways I could work. And oh, imagine myself working on a beach from anywhere in the world.
Now that's my kind of imagining.
All right. I'm talking to patients. I'm like, what? Why can't that be true? So now I'm gonna go to work to figure out how I can make that happen. So yeah, because definitely we're all children inside of us, right? Yes, big children, but it definitely helps us to tap into that part of ourselves because we need to be able to play with our kids, and love is play too. And we need to be able to play with our kids. And if we are just all formal and stuck up, then and we never like let ourselves our hair down and let ourselves just dream, then life will be boring.
I love the idea of visualizing all the good things that could happen. There's a devotional book that I read, and it's called Unshakable by Christine Kane. And one of the entries is about like what ifs. So oftentimes we think about what if things go wrong and all the different ways that it could go wrong, but kind of changing that, shifting the concept of what if in a good way. What if
Yeah.
a bunch of people show up to the event I'm doing? What if I have just the right words to speak and I make great connections? It's kind of fun to change those what ifs into positive alternatives.
Yes, for sure.
Before we wrap up our interview, is there another love letter, another letter that you have in your book that you want to highlight? There's so many, so I'm just going to go ahead and recommend that our listeners and viewers get your book so they can see all of them. But is there another one that sticks out to you that was fun to write about?
I like the love is yummy. I like eating. I like food.
Yes.
So yeah, and I talk about love in Love is Yummy. I talk about how our brain functions are weakened or strengthened depending on the food we put in our mouths because we literally are what we eat. And we literally poison our brains with the food we eat, or we can nourish our brains for more even emotions and sharper thinking. I love to talk about the brain, and I like to talk about it from kids' health from the angle of the brain and also to parents. So what if we considered food in that way? And food is essential, right? And so how can we be healthier? Well, it starts with what we're eating. To this podcast, and you can teach the same things to your class, right? And teach them how they should ask themselves, is my brain gonna be happy with what I'm putting in my mouth, or will it not make my brain happy? Because things like fast food and sodas don't make your brain happy at all. And good things like vegetables and fruits and everything, of course, within reason, makes and water makes your brain very happy. So,
This is my personal reminder to go eat some fruit after this interview.
yes.
I love Dr. Amen, who I know that you studied from and know a lot about, says, thumbs up or thumbs down as you go to make a choice of food. Is this thumbs up helping my brain or thumbs down not helping my brain? So
I,
that's just such a good way to think about it too. Well, I so appreciate your time. The book, everyone, is Children's Love Letters. And before we close, how can listeners and viewers learn more and get in touch with you?
yes. So my website is glowpediatrics.com. And if you'd like a copy of the book, you have a choice on there. You can get it from Amazon, or if you want me to sign it, I will happily do that. And you have the choice to get it that way. And I am starting a program. It's more like a medical home of sorts for children with autism and ADHD. So it's addressing all the other needs that they don't get addressed in like with their regular doctors. So things like their gut health, things like
That's
their
huge.
brain health, and it's for the parents, right? So I'm talking with parents so that they can go home and implement that with their children, and also even offering a safe space for parents to find support and know they're not alone in this journey, because it can be very isolating when your child is neurodiverse and you feel like you're by yourself, but there's so many other parents. And so I'd love to create a warm space where parents can find support and get clarity, find compassion, and go on and just help their kids be the best version of themselves. Because that's really the goal of parenting, right? That our kids are the best version of themselves, not our expectations for them, but of themselves. I think that helps.
Okay, that's just like a major truth, a major like aha realization moment right there. That's incredible. But I know that I want to be mindful of your time, so I am going to wrap up this interview, and I will have the link to your website and other information in our show notes if you're listening through the podcast, or in the links in the description for our YouTube viewers. Thank you so much, Dr. Eko, and I can't wait to have you back on the podcast sometime in the future. I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. It's always a pleasure. And thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you. Thanks so much for listening, and I will talk with you soon. Bye.